Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. All right, so throughout the semester, I have been helped by two classes of law students. One is my copyright class, which have been taping little episodes on different aspects of copyright that I'll air soon. The other one is the IP and Entrepreneurship class. And this class was just so amazing. They helped get the podcast up. They helped get the giveaway up. They're thinking through other aspects of it that we haven't shown you yet. They've just been amazing and wonderful. So this is our last week, and as part of that, we recorded their thoughts about, from their point of view, of what they did and what meaning it had to them in terms of being a law student and working on a podcast about quilting. So this is the law students talking about their experiences this semester. Hi, so this is Elizabeth Townsend-Gard, and we're with the IP and Entrepreneurship class. We are talking about sort of what we did for the semester. We're going to go around. The students are going to introduce themselves, and they're going to talk about what they did and sort of the impact or thoughts about the project. And I'm not going to ask questions. They're just going to reflect.
My name is Allison Lawrence Higgins, and I did the marketing for the podcast. It was very different than anything I had ever done before. I've worked with a lot of small businesses and nonprofits, getting projects off the ground and stuff like that. But this project was very, very different than anything I've done before. The demographics were a lot different, and we kind of had to sort through that on what platforms we wanted to use. And for example, we thought Pinterest was going to be really big because it's quilting, it's arts and crafts, that's what Pinterest is about, and we kind of put it out there and no one really bid on it, which was really surprising to me. So we kind of had to revise that, and we found out that we thought Facebook page was going to be what we needed, but really it was a group. So it was a lot of back and forth on what actually works, a lot of trial and error and things like that. But also, what really surprised me was how fast it grew. I've worked with businesses that are 3 or 4 or 5 years old that still don't have the following that this podcast did. So that was definitely something that surprised me, and it was really interesting to watch.
Hi, my name is Abby Perkins. I helped with the social media of the project. It was a really interesting project, seeing how huge the quilting industry was specifically, and also learning about podcasting in general. I love podcasts, but I never got to see the back end and even what it takes to get a sponsorship of that 15-second ad at the beginning of your podcast. How many followers do you need to get that sort of sponsorship? So I did some research about sponsorship for the podcast, demographic work, and that engagement is really important for podcasts, and that we had such a big engagement and the group kind of kept going by itself, which was really encouraging. So.
Hi, my name is Corey Friedman. So I worked mainly on the social media aspect, and the most interesting thing to me was kind of diving into the world of quilting, because it's really isn't something I understand very well. I'm not the most artistic individual in the world, but I really liked exploring the new venue and just kind of seeing the nuances of how different industries work, and it kind of helped me expand my knowledge into something, and I enjoy learning about things I don't understand. But my favorite part, honestly, was the actual part of being on the podcast, because the communication and just talking about something that we both understood and just having a nice conversation was a lot of fun, and kind of showed me that there was something that I hadn't thought about and something that I would definitely consider doing in the future.
Hi, so my name is Marissa Andrews, and I also worked on the social media side. Probably the most interesting thing for the project for me was the fact that I have family members who are really into quilting, and just seeing the differences between like their level of interest versus the level of interest that we were dealing with and all the different sides of quilting. I'd seen more traditional side, and there was a lot more into it than what I'd even anticipated. And that's saying a lot considering my aunt has an entire room devoted to quilting in her house. So it was kind of an interesting project for me to see those differences.
Hi, I'm Aaron Coffey. I worked on some dissemination as well as some social media, as well as outreach to some of the people for interviews. I had no experience with quilting or podcasts, and it was such a wonderful experience to get to see both sides of the podcast world where, I am an avid listener, but getting to see what it takes to actually get a successful podcast and to get those consumers to listen. It was really interesting to see all of that and see the wonderful outcome that we got. All right.
Hi, I'm Will Perrock, and I did photography and analytics for the podcast, and it was interesting for me to see, because going into the podcast, you think it's all about the podcast, but then we are having all these social media campaigns, these events, and I'm doing analytics on all that, and seeing how it all plays together was really cool. That there's this large community here to support that, and just being a photographer and photographing quilts was cool. It was great going out and to meet the quilters and to see their quilts and hear what they're talking about. Like, sometimes it's the story of the backstory of the quilt, other times it's the cool stitching job they did. And so being able to photograph that was really fun.
My name is Stan Sater. I did analytics alongside Will. And so one of the interesting things going through the analytics and looking at the different dashboards was matching that up with what's going on with the social media campaign. We did a giveaway, and then listening to the actual episodes and looking at in real time where people were dropping off in the episodes and trying to work backwards and understand what's going on from the listener's perspective was really interesting. And then seeing the numbers grow week over week and figuring that out and the different devices and tracking all of that just to, boost listenership.
My name's Ravi Varma, and I really enjoyed learning about how, even though I didn't work on the analytics side, but I really enjoyed learning about how we established an online presence through the analytics. A lot of what I did was researching the local quilting stores in the community, and I also researched museum exhibits that hold quilting up as a form of art. That was kind of interesting for me. I also researched how we could tell a story about what the quilting community is, and thought about different methods, how we could get the information out about what we were doing. Yeah, that's about it.
Hello, I'm Thomas Lemler. I was on the team that was working on the giveaways, or the I guess it's sort of like a sweepstakes type thing. And I found that it was very interesting, particularly on the legal side, where different states had very different laws, mostly aligned through most of the states, but very specifics in certain ones like New York and Florida and Rhode Island. Then I found out that the with quilting, I had no idea originally the intellectual property aspects, and the extent of them that went into it, which I found extremely fascinating, because before this I never really considered looking into quilting, and now it's kind of a really fascinating thing, and I'm hoping to continue learning more about it even after we're done with the project.
Hello, I'm Tomi Aina. I worked on mostly the contact aspect of the website. Part of my job was to organize the website, help Professor Townsend Guard create the website and all the different aspects of it, including the blogs, which are TBD, and also just the Facebook content as well. I really enjoyed working on that aspect of the project because it allowed me to kind of be a floater in many different groups working on the project as well, and it was very interesting, and I hope to continue it as well.
All right, we're moving to the other side of the room. Hold on. We're moving all the way across the room to Chris.
Hey, this is Chris Gonzalez Tablada, and I was on the iTunes team, which I was responsible at the beginning primarily to just getting us set up through our speaker account to actually have our RS feeds sent to iTunes. And the actual process is much more simple than I would have thought it was, but it's also slightly frustrating because anything with Apple can become frustrating, and getting onto the Podcast Connect page had just kind of a bug that was in the way, and I even went to an iTunes store and they offered no assistance, but luckily our actual superstar, Corey, was able to just kind of email and get that up and running, and once we were actually on the account, it was very easy to get our feeds going and to start uploading. One of my focuses was to try to get us in the new and noteworthy, and after a lot of research and even talking to some people who ran podcasts that did get in the news and noteworthy, I realized it's pretty arbitrary. There's no easy way to get into that, and we actually weren't able to, but we were able to build a following of very dedicated followers that is kind of more important than getting on something like a list, especially if we were able to get on that list. We don't know if we were able to keep some of the listeners that came on, and through Facebook we were able to get really a very dedicated following in a demographic we weren't exactly surprised by, but a demographic that kind of bled into a lot of the work that the social media side had been doing, and finding out what were the platforms where quilters were actually assembling, and how to kind of capture and sustain that support and following. So it's definitely been a learning experience, and while there were many different segments of teams working on one aspect or the other, it was very symbiotic, and we all kind of worked together to keep pushing, and it was definitely an interesting experience. And through my own experiences on Entrepreneur, it's very similar to how you have to kind of adapt to your expectations and work with one another.
I'm Kyle Gross. I was on helping the podcast run a giveaway, and I basically was helping them figure out how to run a giveaway legally, which I at first thought wasn't that complicated, but we realized that there's actually a lot of laws that go into giveaways, and when you look into the terms and conditions that most giveaways have, that there's a lot that goes into those, and trying to figure out how those work, and then also figuring out how to engage people through a giveaway was part of what we were working on, and how to get the most out of running a giveaway, whether it's getting people to write a review for you, or just giving them getting names of people who are listening to your podcast, or getting their emails for further engagement, and the best way to get people to enter, and then also choosing an app to run a giveaway was a complicated process. There's a lot of different third-party apps that you can use to put on your own website or put on your Facebook page, and it was a trial and error process to figure out which one was the best one and had the best features. So it was really interesting to learn all these different aspects about giveaways that I didn't know was as complicated and interesting a field as it is.
I'm Briard Snellings. I worked on a podcast quality assurance, which basically means I listen to a bunch of different quilting podcasts, and then listen to a bunch of our own podcasts to both, one, see what the other podcasts were doing, and try and understand different ways that what they were doing that was successful, and what they were doing that we could try and improve on, and then listen to our own podcasts to make sure that we had like reached a certain level of quality, and also that we'd found our own voice.